be feeling right now if I stood close to you? Uncomfortable, happy, irritated. As indicated by this picture, the distance between you and someone else can convey a message. In this case, the picture illustrates a sense of hostility between us in the picture. So good afternoon to all of you. My name is Nur Shahida. Today our group will be discussing on how we communicate through space. We will be focusing on the significance of distance, the different use of space in different settings, and how culture affects our behavior and actions. Examples will be drawn from the Singapore context. So for the outline of our presentation, first we would have Wan Ping, who will be giving us a synopsis of the different kind of space and their specific examples. She will also be elaborating on what happens when different spaces overlaps. And then next we would have Alicia, who will be concentrating on the area of public space. She will be giving us examples on its uses and how it affects human interaction. Then next we would have Seng Kiat, who will be illustrating the use of private space and the existence of personal space even in one's own home. Last but not least, Afia will be concluding the whole presentation. This is a picture of Mr. Edward Hall. Our ideas have been inspired by him and also based on Edward Hall's book, The Silent Language, particularly on the chapter Space Speaks. This is the definition of space. Space is the distance between people is indeed a marker that expresses the kind of interaction that occurs and reveals the social relationships between the interactants. To put it into simpler words, space is a type of relationship between people which determine their physical distance during interaction. So without further ado, I will pass on to Wan Ping, who will elaborate on the use of different spaces. Thank you.
Shasha. As she had mentioned, the distance between two persons interacting will determine their relationship. As in America's context, Hall observed that if two persons are very close together, like 3 to 6 inches, people will tend to talk in very soft whisper and is usually used to indicate a very intimate relationship. As we progress further to 20 to 36 inches, people tend to talk louder but is still of low volume and is for personal subject matters. If we move to a very far distance to about 8 to 20 feet, people will talk in loud voice near to shouting and is usually to address a group or to disseminate info, just like what I'm doing now. Now, I will talk about public space. It's an area open to everyone and anyone can have free access to it at any time, except in some cases where there are possible opening hours. Anyone using that area has the right to do anything they wish to that is within the law. Examples of public space would be lifts and MRT, and it will be further described to you by Alicia. For private space, it's an area that is highly personal and exclusive. The territory usually has definite boundaries marked by gates, walls, doors, and so on. Anyone who wishes to enter this area will have to ask for permission of the owner, or they risk being the trespasser. Visitors cannot go in as and when they like, and only the owner has the rights to do anything they want within that area. Examples would be house toilets and bedrooms, and it will be further elaborated by Singkit. However, there are cases whereby private space and public space will overlap. This happens when you are doing an extremely highly personal activities in a public area. For example, in a public toilet and phone booths. As we mentioned, space can communicate. Thus, the condition of that space will tell others what is your personal character, and you will be very conscious of what you are doing, as you know that you will be judged. In the public toilet, you have the rights to do anything you like in the cubicle. You can dance, you can sing, you can wet the toilet seats. You're entitled every right to do so, but you don't do it because you're aware that you will be judged. How many times have you walked into a very dirty cubicle, and when you step out and you see someone in the queue, you'll go very dirty to show that it's not your doing, that it's very dirty. This is as the condition of that public space will be a gauge to judge what kind of person you are, just because you are doing a personal activity inside. For phone booths, although it's a public space and you can talk as loudly as you want, but you don't behave like that because you are talking about personal matters. And as I mentioned earlier, the distance and the subject that you are talking about will determine your volume level. So you will tend to talk very softly and huddle very close to the phone booth. And as shown in our picture, person in the queue will tend to leave a distance between the person using the phone, although you have every right to stand just next to the person, as that public area is entitled to anyone at any time. But you don't do that because as they are doing their private matter, that there is an overlap of private space in the public area. Thus, you'll give them this unseen private area boundaries, and you won't infringe on their area. Now I will pass on to Alicia to elaborate more on the public space and the examples.
Thank you, Martin. As stated by her, the definition of public space is a place where anyone can have free access to. Now I'm going to cover on how public spaces like the lift and the MRT cabins can tell us about power play and gender interaction. Power play in the lift can be seen in these three instances. Firstly, people will tend to position themselves in strategic location in the lift, for instance like taking up the corners first, specifically the corner with the lift control buttons. For instance, people who stand in the corner will have more power over the people who stand in the middle because they have more control over their individual space. Also, this command of power will extend especially to the person who is pressing the lift control buttons, because he can control where the people in the lift can go. Secondly, if an undesirable event occurs like farting, one would hesitate to point fingers at the person who is having the highest authority in the lift. So for example, like if Miss A is in the lift full of students, right, and if Miss A farted, nobody will point out that it was Miss A who farted. But then if you are in the lift with your friends, the culprit will be pointed out almost immediately. Isn't that true? Okay, next. Thirdly, eye contact will also assist us in marking the boundaries of our space. For example, giving a suggestive look will decrease the distance between two people in the lift, while giving a hostile look will warn people to back away from the person. Now, I'm going to touch on gender interaction in MRT cabins. Firstly, in terms of standing position, females will tend to keep more distance from males than with females. Their body gesture will also suggest the protection of their boundaries. However, males are not as sensitive and concerned about protection of their boundaries. Next, in terms of sitting position, females are less likely to occupy a seat among a row of guys. They are also more likely to find seats beside females than with males. In addition, males will tend to extend their boundaries by opening their legs wide open, while females will keep within their allocated space and will not purposely intrude over their allocated space. Lastly, I'm going to give you an example of what we mean by the maintenance of boundaries. A female who is seated will rearrange herself to accommodate the next person who is trying to have a seat beside her. However, a male will be more nonchalant about the whole situation. Hence, we can conclude that females are less assertive about their boundaries. Now, I'm going to pass on to Sengkiat, who will elaborate on how space speaks in private places. Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. In reference to Wang Ping's definition of private space as highly personal and exclusive, private space is also a territorial boundary where people show dominance.